Hello, one and all, and welcome to the third episode of VRB. We try to keep this up as often as possible. By that we mean with several years in between each episode. I think we had a run there where we had maybe an episode followed immediately by another episode a week or two later, and maybe a live stream in between. And
sounds about right.
I'm Kev, and you may not have heard from me in a while. I think the last time I was on VRB UK was about a year ago, almost to the day, when we were talking about Elden Ring. Obviously, VRB has been a while. And I'm joined today by my VR brother-in-arms, Tim.
Hello. Yeah, we should explain a bit further as well. Diarmuid was invited to be here, but hasn't picked up a new headset yet, has also lost microphones through shenanigans on moving house a few times. So yeah, he won't be here today, sadly, but we thought we'd still do a VRB podcast with the two of us. We did kick this off as a semi-regular podcast previously, but we kind of had to scrap it after two major things happened. One, Diarmuid's PSVR headset died, and so that made it difficult for him to play VR stuff. And then Kev had twin girls, which, congratulations generally, we haven't necessarily spoken about on the show, but I can understand, as we were speaking about before the show, that makes playing VR somewhat more challenging as well.
The wife does not much appreciate it if, when I'm supposed to be looking after the kids, I've just got a big old box strapped to my face.
Yeah, I can see how that one would be difficult. I'm not sure which one's more challenging, having a broken headset or twins. I think the broken headset face can be fixed slightly more easily.
No, I've been putting it on a bit. I've been putting on a bit more recently, mainly on my lunch breaks. But I suppose that's a good opportunity actually to just kind of kick off with, like, we know obviously the elephant in the room here is the PSVR 2.
Yeah,
which you do have one. I do not, just for the record. And I we'll get into it a bit later, but I'm not going to be getting one for a while, should we say. So what's been the kind of VR game that you've been playing, like, and I mean general, just what's your VR participation been since the last time we recorded up until the PSVR?
Yeah, and I've spoken about this a little bit on the podcast in general, but just for anyone that hasn't been listening, and so that we can, catch up to exactly where I am. I packed away my headset when I was redecorating my lounge, which you possibly haven't seen in real life yet, Kev.
It's looking good. I haven't been up there in a while.
But yeah, so my headset was packed up for a while, and then it remained unpacked. You can actually see it in the box just behind me up that way. It remained packed away for quite some time, even after I finished doing my lounge. But then I actually got it out and had a last swan song. There was a few games that I purchased and hadn't played, like Fracked. Very enjoyable little game. I hope that gets a PSVR 2 update at some point. But yeah, there was a few games I hadn't played and just a few things I wanted to kind of, dip back into. And I was getting excited for PSVR 2, so I did that. I also ended up then buying a flight stick so that I could enjoy Star Wars Squadrons even more.
Yes, I heard about this.
And Ace Combat. So I've been playing a lot of both of those in recent months. And glad that awesome Asteroids, and one of the reasons I picked that game up on PSVR 2, one, it's only a $5, so it wasn't the biggest sort of decision in the world. But also, that's the first thing that has HOTAS support on PSVR 2. So I was like, okay, I need to pick that up. I haven't actually tried that in with the HOTAS yet. I had a quick go on the gamepad, but I haven't set up my HOTAS and actually played that yet. But so, yeah, I kind of drifted away a little bit, not just from VR, but also just watching other things like PSVR Without Parole, who I'll give another shout out to, because they have been continuing their coverage all the way up and done a good job of covering the PSVR 2 launch and stuff as well. And I like the guys over there. But even that, I didn't watch as much of that content in the last couple of years or last 18 months or so, because I just wasn't playing that much VR, and there wasn't that many games released in VR as well. There were a few things here and there, but not like, massive big headline games that really sort of demanded attention. I think a lot of people put things off until PSVR 2 was coming, which you can understand, basically. But yeah, going back, we've both been reasonably vocal supporters of VR and big fans of VR. I think that's fair to say, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got cracking with the... you can go back and listen to the old episodes. That was when I had an Oculus Rift at the time, Oculus Rift CV1, I believe it was. So I had the beta version as well, the development kit.
Yeah, I had the
but
DK2.
That was just a bit pants. yeah, that's what I had.
Yeah.
Which obviously didn't even have like room, just the
room scale stuff.
at all.
Yeah.
It was it didn't have the room scale at all and no sensors. So when the CV1 came out, I got a third sensor. I'm not sure if I had a third sensor when we did the last podcast
so,
or not.
I remember, yeah.
But that gave me a full 360-degree experience, which is the first time that I had that, and that was absolutely game-changing. I spent a lot of time. When the pandemic first hit and we were all locked inside, the VR headset was out for a good 2 to 3 hours a day. I was playing a lot of VR at the time. Yeah, I mean, it got me, proverbially out of the house. And I spent a lot of time in that. And that was roughly around the time that Half-Life Alyx came out as well.
Right, yeah.
So I absolutely rinsed that game and then rinsed it again. And I've actually been playing it again quite recently as well, with all of the VR kind of, momentum that's getting behind the scene again at the moment. And I got a new NVMe drive in my computer, and I was just like, I wonder how fast Alyx loads now, because my biggest issue with that game was always that it was such a slow-ass loading. The loading was so bad. Off the NVMe, 20 seconds and you're up and running in a level. Ooh. So, really good. Okay. Yeah, but obviously, like we didn't record a podcast after I played Half-Life Alyx, which to this day is kind of what I define as just the experience for VR. Like, if you want, that's the most complete game I've ever played.
Yeah,
and I really like. If we were going back and retrospectively grading it, I'd probably give it a 4 barrels out of 5.
Okay.
Only because, as much as it is the most complete VR game I've played, it is still trapped in the trappings of virtual reality games, which is you're in a corridor or you're in a room and you shoot things that are coming at you. There's some stuff that you can interact with, and Half-Life Alyx does it better than absolutely any other game that I've played. Maybe save like, Job Simulator, Vacation Simulator, and that Rick and Morty game that came out. They were all really good for just being able to pick up anything in the environment and do things with. But Alyx was the best full game that I've ever played with that. But it's still a VR game, so as I say, it's very, very corridor shootery, and it's very difficult to give it that extra score at the top to say that this is a fantastic experience. It was really good. But not a 5-barreler for me. I will say, though, absolute credit to that game for being allowing the player to just kind of mess with the physics in a way that I guess Half-Life 2 was kind of the first game that let players play with physics to give them options for gameplay that maybe weren't intended by developers. And I'm a big fan of immersive sims and things for that, for that kind of stuff. My love of Dishonored and such is well known. And in Half-Life Alyx, I found a way to pick up a crate. And this was a kind of well-known hack at the time. I say hack. Yeah. You just pick up a crate while you're in a level, stack it, because you run out of room to put. You got like a slot in your wrist and a slot in your other wrist, and maybe your backpack. And then at some point you run out of room for grenades. So what do when you find extra grenades? So you put them in your crate, and you just carry your crate around. And you get into a combat encounter. And you set your crate on a shelf, and then shoot everything. If you need a grenade, pull it out of your crate and lob it. And then the best thing is, you keep filling this crate up with absolute nonsense. You got like health in there and grenades and all sorts, right? I had a gas mask in there at one point, a flipping hard hat. Gnomes? In case I lost my hard hat. There was not a gnome. And that is absolutely, that is a travesty, Tim.
Yes.
An absolute travesty that they never had a gnome in there. Or at least that I know of. But you take this crate and you just carry it around, and then you get to the end of the level, and it loads out, and then you load into the next level, and your crate's still with you.
Hey!
And sometimes it can be a bit buggy, and a grenade will go missing. But for the most part, you just carry all this extra stuff in a crate around with you. So you just got like so many more grenades and whatnot than the game ever intended you to have. And that's the kind of thing that I think like Valve do that so well. And I've not come across another VR game that's given me that level of ownership over what's going on in the gameplay. Like most VR experiences, they might not be roller coaster simulators, but you are very much on a roller coaster a lot of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like room scale has definitely helped with that, where it gives you the ability to have complete freedom within the scope of a room. But Alyx really made it feel like I was going on a journey. Yeah. And there's no game that I've played that has given you a better sense of I'm in a place that I know from my gaming history. Yeah. And I know we'll get onto it soon, but Horizon is supposed to do a very, very similar thing.
Yes and no, and we'll come back to that in a second. I was just going to say, I played quick bit of Half-Life Alyx on my friend's Vive, enough to kind of see it. But as you say, I think it's right. They know how to make a good shooting game, and there's the basics of that as the kind of center point of the game. But then it's the interactable physics of objects in that world that really make it elevate it to something else beyond just a corridor shooter, basically, because
Absolutely.
you've got that stuff that you can mess around with. And oddly enough, one of the first games I actually played in the DK2 was Half-Life 2, because they had a mod for that going back where you could actually play that in VR as well. And obviously it was less than perfect. And I don't think there's anything that's given me quite as much motion sickness as that did. Like, a lot of people suffered from motion sickness on other things. I think that was one of the only times I was like, whoa. And that was mainly like standing on the edge of the buildings near the beginning of that game and stuff like that. That really got kind of...
it was rough.
Basically.
I know exactly which... I know exactly which version you're talking about, and it was really rough. That was around the time that the Oculus CV1 was around.
Yeah.
They've recently released a new... I have yet to try it, but they've released a new, fully modded version of Half-Life 2 to play in VR, which is apparently with actual interactive objects, which is apparently a lot better. So I need to give that a try at some point. Anyway, we're beating around the bush.
Right.
I'm the somewhat proud owner of a Meta Quest 2, because I did get a Quest 2, I think, last year or the year before.
Right, yeah.
When it was still a reasonable price, before they decided to hike the price up by £100.
So, it's gone back down again now.
Which is great for... Yeah, still not to the price that it used to be, but yeah. So that's been really great for just like freeing you of the cable and whatnot.
Yeah.
And honestly, it always makes me a little bit irked when I have to plug a cable into my PC to play those PC games. However, the Quest 2 is very limited. It's like, as an onboard piece of kit, there's not a lot of horsepower in there. So the cable is sometimes a necessity.
Yeah, I hear, but even when you tether it, like, the result of that isn't always as great as you would expect it. Even if you've got like quite a high-powered PC connected to it, like, there's a limitation to the information that can travel down the cable they have, basically, from what I understand.
Yes, because it's using USB-C, USB-C protocol. It's very compressed.
Yeah.
More so than would be preferable. Which is why I've kind of been in the market. I just don't have the money for it anytime soon. But I am in the market for a better headset to drive those games for a much higher resolution experience.
Yeah.
Now, in my case, that's going to be a little while because I still need to buy a better video card first to power the games so that the headset can actually make the use of them. And there's some really good headsets on the horizon, like the new HTC Elite. I forget the full name of it, but it's even got, like, for me, it's an impressive looking thing because it's got... Yeah, that sounds like it. It's actually got some rotators on the lenses to let you kind of rotate around to your glasses prescription.
Right, yeah.
So you don't have to wear glasses if you're a glasses wearer, which is an incredible feature that I don't think any other headset has that I'm aware of.
No, yeah, not that I know of, yeah.
However, no OLED screens out to be found. So I've been waiting around mostly for a PC headset with OLED screens. And then up and come little Sony over there. That little bitty gaming company that only few people have any awareness of, who put out some piece of trash a few years ago for the VR space. And now have come back with what sounds like the best piece of VR headset hardware on the market. Like, bar none.
Yes. I mean, my friend who has a Vive said it's as good as his Vive. I've heard from, I think it was Linus's Tech Tips today. I watched his PSVR 2 kind of review. Mm-hmm. He seems to claim it's even better than that, thanks to the foveated rendering and the OLED screen.
And it's got OLED screen, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'll see foveated rendering become the norm in headsets going forward. So I think that will be something that will be introduced to other headsets. I'll be surprised if the Quest 3 doesn't have it. And I think upcoming headsets, that's something that will be added. For me, the OLED screen definitely looks better. It's a massive improvement on the PSVR. The one thing I wasn't prepared for going in, and again, I mentioned this on previous podcasts, but that it does seem to have a narrower sweet spot than the PSVR one. It's just a little bit more finicky, and if it moves slightly if it moves slightly on your head, then you can lose that sweet spot a lot easier than you could on the PSVR 1, basically. But when it's in that sweet spot, it looks fantastic, basically. And I've only found that, well, it can be a problem when you're seated, but it's more of a problem when you're up and moving around, basically. Like, I found that the headset, I have to overly tighten it if I'm standing up and doing room scale stuff, because otherwise it will slip a bit too easily. Whereas seated, that's less of a problem, basically. But I think anyone looking at getting into VR at this point, I think my simple advice is if you have a good high-end PC, then possibly hold off buying a headset for now, because as you say, there are better ones on the way, and you'll probably pick up something much better this year than is currently available. But if you've only got a console, or if you've already got a PS5, then PSVR 2 is the best route in for you for VR, basically.
Yeah.
The one caveat with that is it does come with a wire, and if that really bothers you, then you've got the freedom of that. I will say it's a lot less of a clunky wire than it was. It also doesn't suffer from the same problem the PSVR 1 had, whereas if you knocked into the wire or knocked into the box on the wire, it tended to cut out for a second and go black, which is one of the worst things that can happen in VR. I really wish developers would find a way around to not ever give you a black screen, basically, because that can be quite disconcerting. Although pure white is possibly worse as well, but hey. But yeah, like, that's one of the things where, like, that's a significant improvement. It wasn't a massive problem for me having a wire previously, but I didn't realize how much of a problem it actually was now that it's less of a problem with the PSVR 2, basically.
Yeah, because it'll actually point it back over your shoulder now, right?
Yeah, like the angle of the wire is better. The actual wire itself is more lightweight. So I've only remembered that it's there on the one or two occasions where I've half tripped over it or come into contact with it. But generally,
yeah,
especially if you don't have room for room scale in your gaming setup, then I don't think you need to worry about the wire. If you're only planning on playing seated, it's just not going to bother you, basically. But it's obviously a bit more of a problem when you're stood up and moving around and stuff like that. But again, it's an improvement on PSVR 1, basically. The thing that the headset is a overall improvement. You've got a dial on there for changing your IPD so that you can do that. The one thing I find is, like, you might accidentally knock that while you're moving the headset around, and then you've got to go back in to do that. One thing I misspoke on the podcast, or I misinformed myself, basically. I thought you had to dig a couple of layers deep to get to the IPD settings, but you can actually there's a quick way to get to the settings, but it is on the top layer. I thought you had to dig down a layer to go into the detailed settings to then bring that up, but it is actually on the first page. It's just called something different than it is in the detailed settings, and I don't know why they called it two different things. But yeah, like, that's a little bit fiddly, but the headset overall is a definite improvement. Like, graphical quality is the main improvement there, but then it's also just brighter and things look better, and the clarity in the headset in some games, particularly in Gran Turismo, Kayak VR, and actually haven't spoken about it on the podcast, but I tried the Call of the Mountain demo, because there's a demo that you can download for that as well. And that looks amazing. Like, the detail on the rocks and the kind of grass on the rocks and stuff is like, you're climbing up a thing. I was just going, oh my God, wow. Like, staring at the rock in front of me because it was so good. But yeah, like, the overall, the headset, like, graphically just looks amazing. I also misspoke on Twitter at one point, and I said that there was 120 hertz mode that you had to turn on. Only works in cinema mode, basically, and it means that you can't output to the social screen when you have it on, basically.
Yeah.
I got slightly confused. I thought that made a difference in games. It could just be that I turned that on and then went back into games and I was actually concentrating on the graphical fidelity again, and we just went, oh my God, it's amazing. But it hadn't actually improved any. Yeah, for me, the headset is a generational leap forward, and as I expressed it before, the controllers are a double generational leap forward, because they didn't just like we had the Move controllers previously, and they were obviously 2 generations old, but we jumped up to something that was on parity with what was already on Oculus and Vive and stuff like that. But I think it's elevated it above that because you've got the haptic feedback on the triggers. The haptic feedback in the headset is okay, and that's used like in a gimmicky sort of way. But the actual haptic feedback on the triggers makes a bigger difference to when you're playing shooting games, and Pavlov with that is ridiculous. Have you seen Pavlov? Because you can get that on Oculus, I think, as well. No, I don't know if it's necessarily on Oculus.
It is available. I've not really looked into it.
Okay. That game is amazing. Like, you have to reload every gun in that game slightly differently because you have to reload them how you do in real life. So shotguns, you have to load shells individually. The whole big like machine, what's that, is it the light machine gun? But the whole like big thing where you actually like take the whole cartridge out, feed in a whole line of bullets and stuff like that. Reloading in that game will be the thing that gets you killed, basically. Because enemies sneaking up on you. I also watched a bit of Ian Higdon playing it today, and I haven't played too much competitive online. I'm more likely to play with friends. That's why I'm keen for you to pick it up as well, Kev. But you can, as Ian Higdon found out today, you can grab other people's guns and take the magazine out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So he was doing that, taking magazines out and stabbing people. And I was like, oh, okay, I've got to give that a go. That looks like too much fun.
Oh, I love the sound of that.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll look more into that game.
Yeah, it's definitely well, and I believe it's crossplay as well, and it's got loads of different modes. It's got like a zombie mode. It's got some weird murder mystery mode thing, which I haven't really checked out. It's got like tank battles and stuff as well. So yeah, that sounds definitely worth investigating. And yeah, as I said, I'll probably only play that with friends, but I'd like to play that with you sometime. And then on the bombs, it's got like codes you have to type in. And you actually have to physically press the right buttons under pressure and stuff like that. So
this is what makes VR great.
Yes, yeah, and they really have understood the brief well type thing. I think they were the first one to get out, but apparently they were very highly rated on PC as well before it came to PSVR. That was one of the ones where it coming to the launch lineup made a big difference, and it was kind of talked about, but then only released at the last minute sort of thing. It's one of those things where, is it definitely coming out at launch? You haven't really got it up on your store in time. I still find the PSVR store a bit weird in terms of what games show up there and stuff as well. Like, they'll have a game that's released and it won't be in the store. It's really weird.
Sony have done the worst job I've ever seen on promoting a new piece of hardware with this thing, which is incredibly depressing because from all reports, it is brilliant, the hardware.
I think again, I spoke about this a little bit on the show, but I think I criticised them for it at first, and then in retrospect, I was like, you know what, actually, in a world where video doesn't really convey what PSVR 2 can do, like you just don't see it when you're watching videos of it. It doesn't convey to you the full experience. You have to really try it for yourselves. And I think that in a post-COVID world where people would be slightly nervous about sharing headsets in public, there's no way to really show that off to the public. So they're probably better at catering to the people that want it first and foremost, the big fans of PSVR and stuff like that want to get it day one. And then using them and influencers. You saw them send quite a lot to influencers, more than I would have thought, possibly. And I think that's with the general idea of this is the best way to sell this headset to more people, actually getting into people's hands so other people can see it directly for themselves. And then if not, at least you can see an influencer going, oh my God, this is amazing kind of thing, rather than just trying to convey that through flat screen videos, basically.
Yeah, I actually get the impression that what they're doing here is a real soft launch. Like, as you say, getting it out to the diehards first, like get the PS1 adopters, see how many of those you can capture. And then when we've got a target audience of influencers and PSVR 1 converts, let's build up the software library because it's not there at the moment. I think we can all agree, whether we have bought into this thing or not, we can all agree that the software lineup is not where it needs to be for this thing to be mass marketed.
Yeah.
And then once that's in place, let's say in 6 to 8 months' time, maybe a year, then they can start really pushing the hardware and saying, look how many people say wonderful things about this. And now we've got the games to back it up as well.
Yeah. And just on that note, there was some criticism of the launch lineup. I can understand when, and I believe I'm correct in saying that when Quest 2 came out, you just had the store there with all the games day one that was on Quest 1, no? So that helps. Sony couldn't do that this time. And it wasn't a mistake to go with the thing they did. I think they needed to be a big step change between PSVR 1 and PSVR 2. The fact that there is different controllers and a different headset, and the headset works very differently, meant that there had to be a step from one to the other. And I actually think in terms of launch library, there was more than I was expecting day one. They had, I can't remember exactly, but it was about 45 to 50 titles on day one. And I think if you compare that to most other launch lineups for hardware, that compares pretty favorably. Like, for me, there was personally a better set of games with the PSVR 1, and there's a few more like headline grabbing games with a console launch possibly. But in terms of the number of games and the different things on offer, I think it was pretty good.
I'll tell you where the problem came in, and this is like what my thinking on it is: the number of games that they had at launch were an awful lot of things that their target audience is basically people who were in on PSVR 1 or people who have been on VR on the PC and now a PS5.
Yeah.
It's a VR audience. That VR audience, because they're in the VR space, have already played most of those games. So the launch lineup, while impressive, if this was your first VR platform, you've got a hell of a good launch lineup.
Yes.
Hell of a good launch lineup. For those of us that have been in the space for a while, this was more of a, here are the things that we know you've played before and you enjoyed, and here's like 3 new things.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit upsetting for those who like, and bear in mind you're paying more than your console for this thing, which is, to be clear, a good price for VR.
Yes.
I think it's worth us mentioning at this point. There was a lot of criticism around the time that the headset was more than the console, and that's mad. And trust me, I've been in this VR space for a while. That's not mad. They're selling real cheap.
Yes.
That I cannot actually argue any. Sony have done really well getting this out for the cost they have.
Yeah, and considering it came with controllers this time, it actually compares fairly favourably to the PSVR 1 pricing as well. Was the point I made on that as well.
Indeed, yeah, definitely can't argue with that. Thank Christ they didn't pull in the bleeding Move controllers again. That's a necessity. It would have been so easy. It would have been so easy for them to say, here's a nice brand new headset. You remember those Move controllers that you've got lying around? Well, we managed to knock another £100 off the headset by letting you use your old Move controllers. Thank you, Sony, for not doing that.
Yes.
At least. Right, that's the hard bit. I will honestly say that I am very jealous of anyone with one at the moment. As much as I don't think the games are there for at the moment, which is why I'm happy to wait. I am really jealous of the hardware. And I will say, I would be a lot more inclined just to whip the credit card out if they unlocked this for use on the PC. If they unlocked this for use on the PC, they would own the PC VR market. Every comparable headset for the PC is £300 to £400 more expensive. So they would own the PC market if they dropped it on there. I think that's
the only mistake in not doing that. We all know it's probably going to get cracked open at one time or other. I think if they did it for support and sold some of their games on the PC platform, as they've been doing in recent years anyway, I think that would be a good move. But I can understand them wanting to keep their walled garden walled, though. It's kind of the way they've always operated, so...
We'll see how it goes. I have a suspicion if they are... Because Sony tends... The reason the PS5 cost what it did is because they were selling it without loss.
Yeah.
They were building it to cost. If they're building this to cost, which would surprise me, but if they are not taking a hit on every unit sold,
Yeah.
There's no reason why they couldn't get a decent amount of sales out the way and then say, right, now we're opening up to PC.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this has been thought by them. There's no way they haven't had these conversations.
Yeah.
And they will make so much money if they do that.
Yeah.
We'll see. The future could go anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the thing you kind of alluded to there that will sort of transition us to more talking about software is, of the headline games they had, I didn't actually pick up Call of the Mountain, which you may have guessed from me playing the demo rather than me playing the full version. I didn't get the bundle version, and there was some FOMO with that in terms of like when people were playing it on the first couple of days, I was like, maybe I should have picked that up. But I still stand by the decision I made. I think for £60, and okay, maybe £40 if I got it in the bundle, but even with that, I was able to pick up a selection of VR games on day one for a similar sort of price. And I think Sony's other problem is their two big headline games that came out day one seem out of date because they're like games that are a year old. But Gran Turismo 7 and Resident Evil 8 are fantastic. Like,
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that Call of the Mountain learned some of the lessons from Half-Life Alyx and other such games where there is physical stuff for you to mess around with in the world. Like, there's pottery for you to break and other bits and bobs for you to mess around with. And I think a lot of people take it as Call of the Mountain is our Half-Life Alyx. I don't think it is. I don't think we've necessarily quite got that game yet. But if I had to choose between the two, I would say that Resident Evil is more our equivalent, because it's more like having a full game that has been, okay, in this case, adapted for VR, but they obviously planned a few things and have changed a few of the way things work in the game to really suit VR. And that, for me, feels like you're wandering around a full game, and that's in VR. I see Call of the Mountain a bit more of a tech demo is too much of a underhand, backhanded compliment for it. But it is almost a glorified tech demo that shows off what the headset can do a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was apprehensive that it would be a game that I would, like, in a year or so's time, I could see me not playing that game again, basically, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, and it being something of, it was good for the launch of the console, but I don't see it being something I'll play going forward. Whereas in a year's time, I can still see me playing Gran Turismo and see me going back to Resident Evil to have another go and another playthrough sort of thing.
I have a question about Resident Evil, because I'm sure you have some things to say about GT.
Yeah.
Do you say that's an adapted game? Like, how far have they gone with that adaptation? Did you play Skyrim VR?
Right, yes. Now,
or Fallout 4 VR?
I didn't play the Fallout 4 because I don't think that came to console, but I did play Skyrim.
Okay.
Skyrim was fun, and I'm kind of glad.
It was very much, you're in the world now.
Yeah.
And the magic and the archery kind of got you, like, adapted. I use the word well very generously.
It was well suited.
Nothing else did
to the thing. Yes, and but
yeah,
that
like
felt
you couldn't
like
pick up objects. It was
that felt like a game that was slightly shoehorned into it. Whereas you can tell with Resident Evil 8, even above Resident Evil 7, you can tell that they planned to make a VR version from the ground up, even though they had to adapt and change the way things work. But some of the way things work is great. Like, to get your flashlight and other equipment, you have to physically, like, grab your jacket, pull it out, and then grab the thing from inside your jacket.
Oh, wow, cool.
And then they've got weaponry, and you can actually, one of the things I really like is you can move where the weapons are on your body. But generally, you're, like, kind of reaching down for your sniper rifle, you're reaching up for your shotgun, up and above the shoulder type thing. And yeah, like, the thing that made me feel like it had been well adapted, but at the same time, like, you could see the slight limitations, is when you're stabbing things with the knife. Like, you are literally stabbing them to stab them. And that felt, I don't know, like, it felt like it had some immediacy to it, so that it felt like you were stabbing something, therefore it was getting stabbed, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it felt good in that respect. but it still felt like a little bit. There was something a little bit off with it, basically, in terms of just
melee
the
combat
one-to-one
is
connection.
very difficult.
Yeah.
Melee combat is really difficult to nail in VR. I can't think of a game off the top of my head that's really done it well. And like, there's a reason that Half-Life Alyx, they decided that despite being a Half-Life game, you didn't get a crowbar, which is when you think
unusual.
about it, a mad thing. But they left it out because melee combat doesn't feel good. It does. Right. There's no resistance at all. With a gun, you've got the trigger. You can, and especially with the haptics you've got on the PlayStation, you can feel it to some extent. Yeah. With archery, again, you can feel it. There's not a lot of there's not enough. Melee combat expects a certain amount of feedback. You need to feel like you're actually impacting something.
Yes, and when there's nothing you're hitting up against, that doesn't feel right, basically.
Yeah, so you end up with games like Gorn, where you're just flipping, going, right, wait for my space.
Slashy. Yeah. And I still think that's possibly slightly imperfect. The one thing that gives me a bit of hope, and I haven't actually played, I'm trying to think of anything melee other than the knife stabbing in that. I haven't had too much. But in Kayak VR, you're moving your paddle around, and the contact that you can get when you hit something with it, or when you sort of scrape it along the edge of your boat, or when you dip it in the water, all feels different and has a kind of tactile feedback to it that I was surprised at how well that worked, basically. And it's a bit different when you're physically thrusting something into something, or, like properly stabbing someone. As you say, it just doesn't have that resistance to it. But I think the haptics might help produce some feedback which will at least allude to that a little bit, basically.
Yeah.
And that might help offset that a little. There doesn't seem to be much of that with what I've played so far, but whether upcoming games, and you mentioned Gorn, we'll do a little section when we're talking about games that are coming out in the next month or so, and that's one of the ones that's getting an adaptation or a remastering for PSVR 2 soon. So it'll be interesting to see what they do haptically in terms of feedback on that as well, basically.
Well, before we get on to upcoming games, have you bought a racing wheel yet for Gran Turismo 7?
No, although
you're on the HOTAS train. I don't know where this train stops, man. How far are you taking this? Are you going all the way to the station with this?
See, HOTAS and steering wheels are a bit of an interesting one for me, because HOTAS for me reminds me of like arcade flight sim playing days, and it's definitely made the games that I play with that easier to play. I find it, once you get round the learning curve of actually, all the different button setups and where things are, actually physically flying feels better with a flight stick. For me, and this is one of those things where I'd really like to borrow a friend's steering wheel to see if I can get round this. But for me, I've actually got, because I don't drive in real life, and I've played video game driving games almost my entire life, I've actually got more experience playing driving with a gamepad than I do with a steering wheel. So it would actually take me a while to learn how to use a steering wheel. And the problem there is also the price of entry is quite high. I mean, I was really tempted on PSVR 2 launch day, while I was waiting for my headset. There was a special offer on and I can't remember the exact one now, but it's G29 or something like that. But it was the
Logitech.
The Logitech one that is rated for is branded and associated with Gran Turismo, basically. And that was down to £200 on sale. When I picked up my flight stick, it was down to 65. 65 is a lot more of a manageable number than 200, basically.
Big difference, yeah.
Yeah, and I think my next purchase will probably have to be an internal hard drive for my PS5. So that's probably going to eat up that sort of money. But yeah, I'm tempted, but not quite, basically. But yeah, just
tell me about the game anyway.
Yeah, I was going to talk about a few other games that I have played. I mentioned Awesome Asteroids. I just like to mention that again because it's from a real small developer. Looks quite cool so far, and I will play it with HOTAS and come back and report on that at some point. But yeah, I've got 2 games that I got review codes for, so I've been mainly concentrating on them other than just, playing around and having some fun with some other stuff. But there's literally a couple of games that I bought. One of them I haven't even touched yet. Demeo is supposed to be very good, and I've heard very good things about, and I can see me really getting into that. But I know that's going to take some hours once I get into it, so I've left that for a time where I've got enough time to do so, and I want to get through the review games first. The other one I haven't played too much of, but I really like what I see, is Runner, which I don't know if you've seen, but I think you'd really like, Kev. Basically, you're on a bike, which is literally ripped straight out of Akira. It is the Akira bike, pretty much, basically. You're being chased by like police bikes that look similar in a kind of, neon-soaked kind of very anime-esque environment. The only problem with that I found so far is it was a bit like patting your head and rubbing your stomach. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to control that. I've been through the tutorial twice and I'm still not sure how to do some things, kind of thing. But you've got 2 guns and you can pick one up and then shoot with that. You can shoot from the bike. You've got a sword that you can pull out as well that will deflect laser beams. And and you got to drive. But they've just brought out a patch for that where you can have one person driving on the social screen and the other person shooting in the headset, which I really like the sound of. Like, reminds me, I've been begging for a Chase HQ game as a co-op game in VR, but this might be the closest thing to it, with one person driving, the other one shooting. I think that will take some of the headache out of it. It means you might have to scream communications at each other of, no, go left. But I can see that being quite a lot of fun. And this you'll like as well, Kev. It's also got a visualizer that you can hook up to Spotify as well as other music services things.
Oh, cool.
And then just sit there and watch the whole visualizer thing as well. So that's one I'm going to come back and play a little bit more of. The 2 that I've been playing for review, which I can exclusively give you my review scores for. I actually gave one a review score in the BRB UK just gone, but I think I've just about played enough of the second one, which is What the Bat, which is a sequel to What the Golf. I don't know if you ever played What the Golf.
What the Golf.
I never played the original, but it's a very zany, silly. You're basically, it's telling the tale of the life of a person that's got 2, I was going to say baseball bats for hands, but it's baseball bats for arms, basically. And you're going through various different parts of their life, and it's sort of I just did one where it's on the farm. I'm about to go to an island. And there's various different points of your teenage years and different things throughout your life type thing. And it just kind of hints at the challenges that you'd come up against if you had 2 baseball bats for hands. With a lot of the puzzles revolving around baseballs, possibly your imaginary elephant friend, or generally this big joysticks that you control with your 2 baseball bat hands that move around, remote controlled sheep and all this type of stuff. But it's very silly. It's one of those things where the solution is so insane. It's often very obvious, and sometimes you get stuck just on a puzzle, just going, why am I? And then you realise, I need to look around the corner to see what's going on, or I need to actually approach this in a completely different way than the last puzzle because it's completely different. But the actual solution to the little puzzle put in front of you, and there's all mini games with a little puzzle to it, but the solution put in front of you is often infuriatingly simple, but also very often hilarious. So it's a game that has kept me laughing throughout the whole thing. I feel a little bit mean. I'd have to see, and this is the only reason that's hesitating me from giving it a score at the moment. I'm umming and ahhing between a 3 and a 4. It would be a 3 with a heavy recommendation of pick it up when it's on sale, possibly, or a 4 with possibly a few more caveats of, I don't know. The one thing holding me back from giving it a 4 completely at the moment, though, is the fact that I don't think it's going to have a lot of replay value once you've played through and seen the solutions and laughed at them. I don't think it would be as satisfying and as funny to play through it again, basically. But That said, I've really enjoyed it, and I've really been laughing like most of the way through it. Has got to the point where I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, another world. Oh, I got but I think just because I'm reviewing it and trying to push myself through it while I've got lots of other distractions and lots of other games I'd like to play, it feels a bit more of a chore. But I think if I was just playing it when I wanted to, that wouldn't really be an issue, basically. But I think I'm just edging towards a 3, but it's a 3 with like if the humor appeals to you at all, then you will really like this game, and that probably elevates it a little bit.
Your mileage may vary, yeah. I was just looking up this. The way you were describing it was reminding me of I Expect You to Die. I was just looking up to see if that was available on PSVR. It looks like the first and second games came out on the PS4 on PSVR 1.
Yes, and I Expect You to Die was one of my absolute favourites on PSVR 1. I'm really hopeful they will bring both out on PSVR 2 at some point. I'd pay to get them again. They're so good. Well, actually, I don't think I ever picked up 2 because I think it came out at the time when I wasn't really playing much. So I'd love to pick that up, but yeah, I'm waiting for it to get PSVR 2. They have announced that 3's coming. I don't know if you saw, there was a trailer that came out for that not long ago. I
am just reading an article about it right now. It says it's coming to Quest 2, Steam, and PSVR 2. Oh, and it also says, people suspect that they will also announce the first 2 games getting ported to PSVR 2, which would serve them well.
Yeah, if they just release a trilogy of that, I'll buy that day one kind of thing. I mean, like, even if I don't get the upgrade path, they're so good. They're so like that. They're so funny. I would say that What the Bat is a much simpler graphical style. Like, it's not a graphically impressive game. That's the other thing.
It's a sequel to What the Golf,
yeah. But I don't think it really needs to be for what it is. But just with, you mentioning, I Expect You to Die, I think that graphically looks really good, and I think it will look amazing in PSVR 2 as well. So I'm really hopeful the whole trilogy will actually come out as well at some point soon.
What was your other review then?
My other review, I'll gloss over a little bit more because I've spoken about that on VRB UK, but that was, and I have to get the exact title right, Zombieland Headshot Fever Reloaded. So this is a game that was available on Oculus. It got a significant upgrade for coming to PSVR 2. One of the things they added was haptic feedback on the triggers for the guns and stuff like that. But it also got a complete reskinning of the graphics, where it now looks a lot more kind of cel-shaded. And I think that really suits the game. I think that was a good decision. From what I've seen of the graphics before, I obviously didn't see them in the headset, but from what I've seen of the graphics before and what they are now, I think those graphics pop really nicely in the headset. It looks really good. It's basically a light gun game, almost essentially, very arcadey. I originally said Time Crisis, but I corrected myself to House of the Dead just because it's zombies, basically. So it fits that a little bit more. But actually, structurally, it probably plays a bit more like a Time Crisis in terms of you've got an area, there's things in front of you, shoot, and then move to the next area. And you are teleporting between areas. But yeah, this is a weird one. I didn't get this at first, but I think the teleportation you can use on sticks. You can just, go up on the stick and it will send you to the next place. But it seems to also work on eye tracking. So if you're looking at the next place when you kill the next zombie, you just zoom straight there, basically. Which is a bit disconcerting if you're trying to pick up things like there's various collectibles that you try and hit in the environment. So if you're trying to do one of those, it can actually work against you. But generally, it works reasonably well and it kind of suits the game and you can kind of get through things nice and quickly. It's got, as I described him, a budget Woody Harrelson and the rest of the cast. Like, they aren't the original cast from the Zombieland films. But it's got like a double tap mechanic where you got to like hit them twice in the head and then you get a shot of adrenaline and that means you can combo to the next one. But the more adrenaline you get also minuses from your overall time. So you can actually get a good chunk under the time that you got by getting a load of adrenaline, and that knocks off your total time at the end. And you're mainly going for a time rather than a score type thing, basically. But then there's
Gotcha. Okay.
there is some scoring to it, but yeah, you're mainly trying to get through in as little time as possible, basically.
That's just made me have a flashback to. Do you remember? I think it was on Xbox 360, The Club.
Yes,
where it was a game where you rush through the levels, and the idea is to every target you hit gives you a time decrease, and the idea is to try and beat 0 seconds.
Yeah, and I think this works really well. I actually be interested to see if they provided the upgrades they did for PSVR. Obviously, I don't think they can do haptics, but whether I would imagine they upgraded the graphics for everything else. And if they did, then I'd recommend you picking it up on Quest as well, because it's a bit of a blast to the past, but it's like really quick to play through levels. Like you can get through most levels in a couple of minutes, and it's very much the do the level, unlock all the levels, unlock the upgrades, go back to earlier levels to get better times and get through faster because you've got new perks and new weapon and you've upgraded your weapons so that you can get through them better and stuff like that.
Very similar to Robo Recall does that as well.
Right, yes, which is another game I hope comes to PSVR 2 at some point, because I don't think we ever got that, basically.
I wouldn't hold out hope. That's an Epic game.
Oh, yeah, right.
I just don't think they've got a lot of incentive to throw that across, but yeah.
While we're on that subject of things not coming to PSVR, though, I think that's one thing we've spoken about briefly on BRB UK, but we mentioned before the show as well. I don't think Half-Life Alyx is ever coming to PSVR 2. A lot of people were clamoring for it to be in the launch lineup and come. There's no reason for Valve to give away their system seller. There's no amount of money that Sony can offer them that is a sensible amount of money that covers that Valve needs. Like, I can't see them ever working. The only way I could ever see it working is if Valve strike a deal with Sony that Sony games come to Steam and that their headset works on Steam as well, basically, and possibly as exclusive and not on Epic Store and stuff like that as well. But again, I can't see Sony doing that. So I just cannot see that deal ever coming off, basically.
I suspect if that deal were possible, and I would not be surprised if behind closed doors Sony were running up to Valve in the 6 to 8 months prior to the launch, just with wads of cash. How much do you need to give us this, to port this game over? And Valve just went, there's literally no amount of money that you can offer us. We don't need... We make this... The amount of money you're going to make off that entire launch worldwide, we make in a day. Like, there's no amount of money you can give us. We have no incentive to bring that over. How about you unlock your headset for PC and then people can play games on Steam?
Yeah.
I think if it were going to happen, it would have happened already, or we would have heard about it. I don't
possibly
think it's
the
happen,
only
that's
thing
depressing because
the only thing I can think is that Valve might think that a rising tide floats all ships type thing and go with the, okay, you can have it, but you can't have it at launch because we're not going to help you launch, but you could have it a year, maybe a year and a half into the life cycle. That's more of a possibility, but I think it's like a 10% chance rather than the no % chance at launch.
Honestly, I don't even think it's the like proprietary stuff that Valve care about. I just think they've got an amount of resource available to them, and they don't see the point in dedicating any of that resource to a port. Now, there's potential here in the future for Sony to say, look, give us the source code, and we will put the money in to port it. At that point, Valve has nothing to lose, everything to gain.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But I just can't see them going, you can have the main system seller and the reason for people to buy our headsets, we will give to you for nuppence. I just can't.
It's not. Well, the thing is, it's not like people aren't going out to buy a Steam Index to play Half-Life Alyx. They go out and buy an Oculus Quest and a USB cable to play Half-Life Alyx. Yeah. So that it's not a system seller in that regard. However, obviously, it is the best-selling VR game on Steam and has been. It's the only VR game on Steam that is constantly in just the top 10 sellers on Steam, VR or otherwise.
Yeah.
It's mad that game is still doing such numbers. But deservedly so. But yeah, I can't see it happening now. To be honest with you, I think never say never, right? But it's just,
Yeah.
if it were going to happen, this would have been the time for it to happen. So, sadly,
as I said, I could see Valve saying, the caveat of you can't have it for launch, but you could have it at some point in time afterwards. That's the small nugget of hope I have. But yeah, as I said, that's a very small percentage chance, I think, basically. 10% may even be generous.
What's on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
Yeah,
no pun intended.
I mean, let's talk about the upcoming month, because the launch lineup we've spoken about, but I think there's as well as being a good set of games for anyone that was coming from PSVR 1. Like you said, not as many stuff because there was a lot of things that had already been on other headsets. So there's not much to tempt the PC market over, and that may be the case ongoing for a little while. But Sony haven't really spoken about a lot of their PSVR 1 games that really should be on PSVR 2 at some point, and they haven't spoken at all about any adaptation for other games. There are some games that you wouldn't necessarily think of VR that I think would work really well in VR. Returnal being top of my list there, basically. I think that could look awesome in VR, and having, the bullet hell headed towards your face could be quite an interesting kind of prospect.
Well, I'll tell you what you can do with Returnal, because that's one of the games that runs at 120, right?
Yes.
Hertz.
Yeah.
Crank the resolution down. So the thing not a lot of people talk about with PSVR 2, but I think is actually a really massive selling point, or should be a really massive selling point, is this is a 120 hertz screen that costs just over 500 quid.
Yes.
If you don't want to pay over £1,000 for an LG C2, you could just get this thing and play all of your games in the cinema mode, which is effectively you playing a 120 hertz cinema screen. That is a massive selling point for the PSVR 2 that I don't think gets talked about enough, but would obviously give you a high frame rate Returnal experience. Yeah,
the one thing I found is that the cinema mode on PSVR 1, I had it at maximum size. I find that more uncomfortable on PSVR 2. I don't know if it's just because the lenses feel closer to your face somehow, but I've actually dialed that down a bit. But even not at full size, you can probably see behind me if you're watching the video version. If we've got a video version, that may be a thing. But anyway, I've got like a 65-inch TV. It's pretty big. But even at not the full scale, it's still a bigger TV in cinema mode. It's just, I never played that much of cinema mode. The one thing I'm disappointed in that they don't have in PSVR 2 that we had in PSVR 1 is 3D Blu-ray support. I guess there's just not as many 3D Blu-rays around anyway, but it was always nice. Like, I watched Dread in that and a few other things that just looked fantastic in 3D, basically. So I don't know if that's something they can patch later down the line. I would like them to do that. But yeah, as you say, the cinema thing is good, but I don't think it's quite as good as having a big TV and just playing on that, basically. If you've got limited room and limited finance, then yeah, like you say, it's half the cost for a similar sort of experience. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say if you had no interest in VR that would still be worth it type of thing for the investment sort of idea. But yeah, no, as you say, it's not something that's often spoken about, so worth mentioning. But yeah, like, as I said, Sony have been quite quiet on a lot of games that I expect to have PSVR 2 versions coming up. Blood and Truth is one that I'd really like to see myself. That would be great. And then a few others like Wipeout and stuff like that, I expect we will get a version at some point. It's just I don't know at what point that will come and how they'll do that, whether it will be an upgrade, that paid upgrades to get it, or whether it will just be a free version. I suspect they might do something with PlayStation Plus with that, basically. We'll wait and see on that. But there is some definite things they can talk about there that I think will be another string to PSVR's bow that they haven't revealed yet, basically. The one thing that they have revealed is I think there's a lineup of good games coming this month, like post-launch. So we'll just run through a couple of those and try and talk about which one of those will probably be on Quest for your benefit as well, Kev, and then which ones will likely not be on Quest. So coming up this month, we've got Before Your Eyes on March the 10th. That was the one that they showed off in the recent State of Play. That is controlled with your eyes. Time goes forward when you blink, basically. And I wasn't that interested in that before until I saw the presentation on State of Play, and I was actually like, oh, okay, that could actually be interesting. I mean, it's still a heavily like story-based game, but whether I pick that up will be dependent on price point, and I think they've already released the price of that. I just don't remember what it is. But that's coming out on March the 10th. That could be of interest. The one that I'm really like definitely buying day one is the Dark Pictures Switchback. If anyone doesn't know, that's the sequel.
I knew you were about to say that.
Yeah, the unofficial sequel to Rush of Blood. That comes out on March the 16th. It's a roller coaster shooting, almost light gun game like type thing, but I can see that one that's actually gets good use of some of the features there. I can see the haptics working well in that. There's things where mannequins that were in the first game in Rush of Blood that moved when you moved your like field of view away. So when you looked away, they'd move and then they'd be in a different position when you come back.
Oh, I hate those things.
Yes, even worse, this time they move when you blink, Kev. So that could be quite scary. I'm quite looking forward to
any game where this happens messes me up.
It definitely sounds like it's going to mess you up then. Gorn is also coming out on March the 16th. Again, don't really know if that is one where I'm hoping that's one where you can get a paid upgrade, because I played that on PSVR 1 but didn't play it too much because my Move controller was playing up at the time. And yeah, like I'd like to, if that's a reasonable upgrade price, then I will buy that. Just suffers from a bit of the fact it's coming out on the same day as Dark Pictures Switchback, and I'm definitely planning on picking that up. There's one that, to be honest, I don't like the look of. I appreciated Job Simulator. I never picked up Vacation Simulator. I think I got enough out of the demo of Job Simulator. We said about like things being fun to mess around with and stuff like that, but there's a game coming called Startenders Intergalactic Bartending. It's coming out March the 17th. It is a free update for PSVR 1 owners, but I didn't own it on PSVR 1. And from what I hear and what I see of the game, that looks a bit too much like actually having a job for my liking. So I don't think I'll be picking that one up, basically. No interest in working behind a bar, I'm afraid. The one that's another like big game that I suspect will be coming to Oculus. We nearly got through a whole show without saying Oculus, Kev, and I messed it up right near the end.
I don't think we have. I think you've said it a lot, actually.
Okay, all right. The one that might be coming to the Meta Quest, I'm assuming. Did you play The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners?
So I have not played Chapter 1 yet, and I have not played Chapter 2 yet, which is already out.
It's already out.
PC
okay.
And Quest.
So chapter 1 came out on PSVR 1 and was also given away. I think it wasn't quite PlayStation Plus. It was when they just randomly gave away some PSVR games, and I picked it up then, but I still haven't played it, mainly because me getting 2 Move controllers and working out which one of them works properly, because the button stopped working on one of my Move controllers. For some reason, I have 3 of them. But I think I originally had 4. But anyway, but then, so I haven't played that too much, but that looks very good. And I think Chapter 2 is probably going to take even better advantage of the haptics and stuff. I'm guessing that's why it's been delayed till now to come out. But yeah, Coleman spoke very highly of that. I think it was one of his favourite VR games on PSVR 1. And so I think they said something about it being an upgrade. I can't remember if it's a free upgrade for the first one. But if it is, then I'll play through the first one, then possibly pick up the second one when I'm done with that, basically, is what I'm looking at there.
The only reason I've held off on those 2 games is because the videos of them make it look like... You remember earlier on I was saying about how hard it is to get melee combat right. And I don't know if they do it right, but it looks like there's a lot of wailing your hands around in that game with melee weapons.
Yeah, and that can get tiring as well.
Sure that A, is it fun, And B, are my surroundings going to suffer as a result? One of the downsides about having kids now is that I don't have a massive room to play games in anymore. As you can see, I am full of musical instruments and PC desk. And there's if I move this chair back, there is maybe a 3 square feet space for me to stand in. So I am my room scale is just standing still and going like this, spinning my hands around. And hoping that I don't hit a nearby thing.
Yeah, that's one other thing that you've reminded me that I didn't talk about with What the Bat. That's one of the problems with What the Bat. Apparently it's being patched, but I don't know if it's been patched yet. But What the Bat requires room scale, and it requires a 2 meter by 2 meter area, which I just about squeezed in by cheating and lying. My couch is part of my floor. Yes, it is.
This is what I always do with the MetaQuest. The MetaQuest makes no bones about telling me, Kev, you've got things in your area, and I'm like, just ignore it. Just ignore it. That fine. Guardian, don't 30 meters in every direction. I'm fine. I'm in a field. Don't worry about it.
But
don't tell me that I'm running out of my Guardian.
Another thing we didn't talk about, though, the setup on PSVR and how you do that is amazing on PSVR 2. Like, it does a room scanning thing where it does that. But then you can also, like, when it comes to setting your play area, you can just, using one of the sense controllers, I keep on forgetting what they're called, but the sense controllers, you can just literally poke it out or pull it back in and adjust the area. That's really good, actually. I really quite like the way they've done that. Just completing the last couple of games that are coming out in March as well. We got the C Smash Versus or VRS demo. Apparently that stands for VR and Versus C Smash. That's coming out March the 23rd. That's just the demo, but I'm really keen to play that because it looks interesting. It looks like it's kind of fulfilling the gap of some games that we lost from PSVR 1. I don't remember the Dreamcast game. That obviously came way late in the Dreamcast life cycle, and I never played it back in the day. But there was a few people that got to play an early version of that at a preview event, and it was highly spoken of, at least, basically. That seems to be like it's going to be a good, fun kind of cross between a Tron-looking, not quite Tron, but kind of flat-shaded, simple graphics, but kind of stylized and interesting take on Squash meets Breakout, basically. Curious to see how that one works. I'll be interested in that one. Also, rounding out the month on March 30th is The Last Worker, which I don't know if you've seen videos of this yet, Kev. Believe it's coming to Quest as well, actually. So it should be of more interest to you. But you are basically, and the company is actually called Jungle in the thing, but it's basically you're an Amazon workhouse employee. You are the last human left alive by the looks of things. Everyone else in the factory is a robot. You are the last human worker in their massive warehouse. Whether I don't know if you're entirely the last human alive, but definitely the last human worker at definitely not Amazon warehouse, basically. But that looks really silly, like really good humoured. I'm expecting a bit from that one. That looks like it could be really good. I believe I'm correct in saying that they put out a thing the other day that not only is that coming to other VR platforms, it's also coming to Switch, and it's also coming to Playdate. So
straightforward game then, if it's on the Playdate.
Yeah. I mean, it does look mainly story-based, and you're kind of walking around a factory interacting with other robots, and like, I don't know how much puzzle solving there is, but it definitely looks like it's very heavily story-focused, basically.
That's cool. It's very, the premise reminds me of, I'm sure I mentioned this in the last episode we did many moons ago. A game called Budget Cuts, which I played both of those games, Budget Cuts 1 and 2, and that's another one where you're a human the company has decided that humans are no longer required. Services are no longer required, and robots come around trying to murder you to get you out of the building / and out of your mortal coil.
Yeah.
And it's a stealth game, effectively, where you have to sneak around and avoid them. It's great fun.
Yeah, I remember that being spoken of highly. Another one, I don't think that ever came to PSVR 1, as far as I remember.
I don't think it did, no.
I don't think it did. So, yeah, be interesting to see when that comes out. But yeah, in the meantime, you'll have to pop over and try my PSVR 2 at some point. If I mean, popping over for you is a bit harder, but if you're in London anyway,
a little bit harder. Yeah, we will definitely be up to London at some point in the future. I like coming up and popping my head in when I'm up there, and pop in for a Tabletop Tuesday and whatnot as well.
Oh yeah.
Which I will leave the promo for your other podcast. Yeah. So on that note, I think we've had a good chat there about your PSVR 2 experience, and I think we will even try to make a pledge now that we will do at least another one of these in the next year.
That's a very loose promise.
We've got a few more games under your belt on the PSVR 2. Yeah, definitely. If I do end up deciding to get another headset, I'll definitely want to pull another episode out.
Yes,
There's things on the horizon for PlayStation, so I think we need to keep checking in every now and again to see how PSVR 2 is doing. Because, as I say, I'm excited about it. I'm just not excited enough that I want to pull the trigger on 530 quid or whatever it is.
And I can totally understand that, but I'm glad that you're getting excited enough that you wanted to have this conversation and wanted to do a podcast around it. But then I think that's part of the excitement of getting a new headset beyond just PlayStation fans, because I think it's injected something into the VR market. I think it makes it more viable for games to come to both headsets. I think we'll see a little bit of that going forward. And then, as I said, there's a few cards that Sony are playing close to their chest at the moment. I expect them to come out in the future. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I think it's an exciting time for VR in general at the moment, basically.
I hope so, because let me tell you, as someone who's been keeping relatively up to date with the Oculus scene and the PC VR scene in general, it has been a stagnant puddle for the last couple of years. Like there's the exact same games that people were talking about 2 years ago are the exact same games being bought and played today.
Yeah.
Which is just sad. It's not being pushed forward, and hopefully Sony can give it a bit of a shot in the arm and say, like, look, we could actually move this a bit forward. And as you said before, rising tide lifts all boats. Hopefully. So we'll see how things go. I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that we can actually get some progress in all platforms. And if Sony decide very nicely to unlock their headset so that we can plug it into the PC, then I'll be a very, very happy boy.
In the meantime, we'll have to rely on some games that are cross-play, and so that we can hook up with that. Maybe Pavlov, maybe some other stuff in the future.
Is that cross-play? That must be cross-play.
I believe it's cross-play, and I think Walkabout Mini Golf is coming up. I don't know if you've already got that, but a load of my friends play that.
I've not, but I've thought about it several times.
Yeah.
I play a lot of... I was actually telling my wife earlier, when I said I was doing this podcast, and I was telling my wife that sometimes I stand between my chest of drawers and my bed, which is about a 4-foot space, and I play Golf Plus, which is a great game on the Oculus Quest. Yeah, so we're gonna come back and see how this is doing. We'll check back in a little bit, and see what's cracking. So, thank you very much, Tim. That's been a really good conversation. I've enjoyed hearing your opinions. And we will be back at some point in the future. So thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Kev.
And we will catch everyone next time. Please.
Your ears are quite welcome for the podcasting goodness that you just heard. Why not roll on over to BigRedBarrel.com for more podcasts, news, reviews, and videos from the biggest, reddest site on the internet, BigRedBarrel.com.